Oh, this thing again now.
Yeah, man, as Ken would say, welcome to the History of LA Ska one-on-one sessions. I'm Junor Francis. And this amazing series celebrates the ska, rocksteady, and vintage reggae scenes in Southern California and beyond through insightful conversations with legends and modern day players, including those behind the scene. And there are a lot of people behind the scene, too numerous to mention. Indeed, this is the 25th one-on-one sessions on our 10th of this new podcast and YouTube channel format. 10. Wow, we're moving along. Today, we welcome veteran musician Ken Stewart, who has honed his skills since the 1980s by literally performing alongside creators of ska, the Skatalites. Wow. For many years, Ken was also a Skatalites manager, and he is quite the Jamaican music historian. Ken, welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. How is everything, sir?
So far, so good. We just had a great weekend at the Supernova Ska Festival.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about. The Skatalites on tour. I guess this is your first tour since the lockdown, right?
Yes.
First time on the road. And how are you and the rest of the Skatalites feeling? And what was it like performing at the Supernova Festival this past weekend?
Well, it was wonderful to see so many fans, musicians, friends, combinations of all of the above. And it was great. It was previously sold out, so we knew it was going to be as full as it could be. And it was a nice little spot in a brewery in an old fortress on the ocean in Hampton, Virginia, near Virginia Beach.
And about how many people were in attendance when the Skatalites performed?
Well, it's hard for me to judge crowds these days, but I want to say somewhere, I don't know, at least 1,000, but not too many more than that. I'm not really sure. I never asked them how many tickets they did sell, but it seems like I'd say for the bigger acts, ourselves, Hepcat seemed to have a good crowd on Sunday, and Pilfers on Friday. Probably the most people was on Saturday and Sunday, though.
Right. So, and how the band typically tour the United States? Do you go by van or by trailer or jet? I mean, I don't know how deep your guys' pockets.
If we're doing routings that are fairly close together, like we are about to start on Thursday and come see you in LA on Saturday, we will be traveling in a Sprinter van, which they have now doubled the price to rent.
Why is that so?
Oh, the good old COVID price gouging.
Oh, that's extremely unfortunate. And the promoters are not saying, oh, yeah, we're going to double the price now.
Hotels in California are ridiculous. They're getting at least $100 for even Motel 6. And it's very
price gouging again.
Yeah, it's very challenging to come back out on the road with under this, because the fees didn't go up and people are usually trying to offer you less because they know that capacities are down and this and that. And so it's a battle, but we're coming.
Yeah, so between transportation and hotels, you guys have to pay the farmers ransom. Wow. That's extremely unfortunate, man. So let's talk about you, your background. I think I read somewhere that your upbringing, in fact, both of your parents were musicians.
That is correct. My dad, I am at my dad's house right now. He's 81 and still performing in an 88-piece symphonic orchestra, as well as several jazz, trad jazz, traditional jazz. 88-piece symphonic band called the Arizona Winds.
Wow.
There's 5 tubas. He's one of 5 tubas.
And your dad plays what instrument?
Tuba and trumpet, but in this band he plays tuba.
Yeah, wow. And not to leave out your mom, she plays instrument as well?
She plays piano, and she played the bass drum when my parents were in high school, and there was an early pregnancy involved, and my mom was carrying the bass drum while I was inside her. She was playing in the marching band, and my dad was playing the sousaphone close by.
So music all from before birth, from in the womb, music.
Come on.
So when did you start playing music at home? When did you learn to play music?
Well, they sat me down at the piano. We would do these little trios where I'd be kind of like tinking on the ivories a little bit. My mom would play something like a vamp, and my dad would play a bass line, and we'd jam out in the basement. And the piano we had was a player pianos. We had the old-fashioned rolls, but it wasn't electric. You had to pedal that sucker. So as soon as I was old enough to do that, I started learning, loving the ragtime, because that's most of what those rolls were. It's Scott Joplin and Jelly Roll Morton and this kind of stuff, So eventually I joined the choir first with my mom at church. She had joined it too. So then that same year, I could read music. They taught us in school how to read music. And so I could start off pretty well. And then I immediately, you could tell I was kind of musical. So I started taking lessons, piano lessons, which didn't last. By the time I hit junior high school, that was no longer really what I wanted to do. I wanted to play. And actually, when I was in 5th grade, some neighborhood kids came by and asked my mother permission if I could be in their band. And we played mostly Beatles, Let It Be. The album had just been released, and that's what they wanted to play. And a couple of blues and a couple of songs that I could try to improvise to.
Nice. So outside of Beatles, who are some of your musical influences? I think Beatles was by default, since the band members wanted you to play that.
Well, at an early age, I liked the typical rock stuff. I was more fond of bands that had more interesting stuff going on, though. I stepped quickly into progressive rock. Yes was, one of my favorites. Jethro Tull, Emerson, Lake and Palmer to some extent. But then fairly early on, I got into jazz fusion, because it wasn't, it was the embryonic stages of that. And I happened to be also walking by in downtown Boston. There was a place called the Jazz Workshop and Paul's Mall. And actually Bob Marley and Toots both performed at those venues early on in the early 70s. I never knew about that, but I didn't even know really what reggae was. Oh, sorry, I got an alarm going off. Yeah, I put that on a while ago. Anyway, yeah, so I'm walking down the street, and on the marquee, I see Cannonball Adderley. And I recognize the name because I listened to jazz on the radio. So I go to this show, and, it's a small, tiny club. And also with Cannonball Adderley is Nat Adderley, his brother, who played trumpet. Cannonball plays tenor or alto, I can't even remember. I think alto. Anyway, this was, a long time ago, and I recognized a couple of the tunes from the radio. And so that was my first jazz show, really. And I just took a loving to fusion, especially the band called the Crusaders was, I think, the first album I got a hold of or heard. And then I just went from there. And Chick Corea, who was also local for me. But at that time, in the mid-70s, Boston was pretty much the jazz mecca. You had some stuff going on in LA with certain labels and folks, but most of it was based in New York and Boston. You had Berklee School of Music, you had Pat Metheny, Gary Burton, all these jazz greats and upcomings, and also slightly older folks lived in that general vicinity. So you had a lot of stuff coming through. And if you went out on a given night, you could see 4 to 5 bands per night in different clubs if you went bar hopping, even on a Monday night.
So let me ask you about to share some of your musical endeavors prior to joining Skatalites. Did you play with other bands before?
Yes, I played, of course, I played in high school. I played in rock bands, even junior high school. Started a couple of bands, and they were, nothing big, but we played at least for the high school and for the Eagles Club, and our parents and stuff would try to get us gigs and that kind of stuff. So eventually, I stopped playing for a while. I wasn't gonna. It's funny because I have two musical parents, but they weren't really interested in me going to Berkeley, which I definitely entertained that idea early on. But I ended up studying occupational therapy instead. And, I had a day job, and somewhere around the early 80s or around 83, 84, I finally bought a polyphonic synthesizer and, started experimenting with what was going on a lot. And I also was taking a liking to a lot of the reggae I was hearing, and was just starting to sort of experiment with it almost subconsciously. And then someone called me up and asked me if I wanted to come to an audition for a reggae band. That was early 90s, 86.
86.
So I went and I met a group of characters that had a band going on, a couple Jamaicans, one particular that was named Coswell Jackson, called him Jocko, from Mobe, from Katadupa. And he was the lead vocalist, and there was a couple of guys, there was, black and white folks in the band, and got friendly with them and learned about Jamaican culture and cuisine and music. And then we went to see the first big show together. They said, "Oh, Burning Spear's coming to town. You got to see that." So off I go to Burning Spear. Now, I had no idea really what I was going to. And I get there, and he was already starting to gray up a little bit. The dreads, long dreads, gray hair. And his band was just amazing. But uniquely, they had the three girls had just started playing with him on horns.
Mm-hmm.
So you had three young, beautiful women playing horns, very nicely dressed there up on stage with these older Rastas and Jamaican guys. And it was a very cool mix. And of course, Spear, his voice sounded like a trumpet. And he's just going off on these 2-chord jams all night long. And man, I just loved it. And I really started to appreciate the music at that point. Like, man, this really is something, what you can do with even those 2 chords within. I really love the ensemble effects. And there wasn't so much focus on particular soloing. Maybe somebody would get a solo, but that wasn't like the big part of it. It was like much more about what each person was contributing. So I liked that a lot, and I decided I was going to stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I joined the band that opened that night was a guy called Errol Wilson, aka Wilson Blue, who was known in Jamaica as Boy Blue, but he was the Boy Blue from Mobe, because there was another Boy Blue from Kingston. And Blue had a voice, boy, he could sing ballads, and he could sing just about any kind of music. And he could also, if you play, you were coming in as a fairly new reggae player, he could tell you how to play no matter what instrument, he could tell you how to play reggae on it.
Wow.
So he was particularly helpful.
He didn't make it big time.
No, he has a record. There was 2 records put out, and I have one of them at my house. And that was, a fairly primitive production that he did locally in Rhode Island. But the next one, he went down to Miami, and when Inner Circle had just bought their studio in Miami, he went down and cut a record with them. We're talking maybe 89 or no, it was more like 87. So that was never released that I know of. But that's the thing, his girlfriend slash manager really didn't actually want him to go on tour. But she humored him and put out this stuff because she, she just, they were taxing it just to tour New England. So God love him. He was a great singer. I don't want to say too much more than that.
Yeah, career ruined. So here's $1 million question now, Ken. How did you get introduced to the Skatalites?
Well, this is part of the story because it was that band that it happened in. So all of a sudden we're sitting there one day and the girlfriend slash manager says, oh, well, our drummer can't make a certain show. So we're going to use Lloyd Nib from the Skatalites. And I had just seen the Skatalites for the first time a couple months previously. And as I said to a friend of mine, if there's any band I could ever be in, this is the band. And all of a sudden, now the story changes from he's coming to do one gig to Lloyd Nib is coming to live in our house and to be our drummer. And I was in disbelief and also scratching my head saying, why would he ever want to do that? Because these two were quite the duo. Like it was almost like a bad comedy team. But, he came up, he brought his drum set. He had been living at King Bravo's house in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know who King Bravo was, but he was actually a singer who recorded a couple of tracks, but he was mostly an extremely entrepreneurial type of guy who bought a house in South Orange, New Jersey, probably for about $5,000 when, you could just buy any house, these old tenements in a bad neighborhood. And as long as you lived in it, mostly there was crackheads living on all the empty ruined ones next door, but it was an interesting experience. And a lot of people lived with King Bravo. Winston Grenin lived with King Bravo, Lloyd Brevitt, Lloyd Nib, Tommy McCook, people that came in and out of these, Toots's band, Skatalite, Winston Grenin's band. It was, like a housing for wayward musicians that were trying to find their way, So that's where I went to, actually ended up at my first audition was at King Bravo's house.
Mm-hmm.
So when finally, I got to know Lloyd, that was 87 that he moved to Rhode Island. And in early 88, we got him out of that situation because it was not a good situation. And we got him up to Boston. And we started a band. This is another funny story because we started a band called the Supersonics because I asked Lloyd what names he had played with that he thought was not a problem to use. And I had no clue what the history of the Supersonics. We didn't have YouTube. If I didn't have a record in my hand, I didn't know that was a band. They didn't even have internet. So we started Lloyd Nib in the Supersonics, but Tommy was not particularly happy with Lloyd. Because Tommy was actually aspiring to restart the Supersonics as well as the Skatalites in America.
But how would Tommy know about the band, a band in New England?
Well, because we saw Tommy regularly. Because as a matter of fact, one of the reasons that we got Lloyd out of the situation was because it came up that there was a gig at SOB's schedule for the Skatalites, and this woman, the girlfriend slash manager, she wouldn't let him go. So that's when I had to say, all right, this woman is not going to mess up the Skatalites.
So she's a musician controller.
Yeah, she was just a vampire of various sorts. Anyway, and the people who actually might listen to this and know who I'm talking about will be chuckling like you are. So anyway,
musician, you are the control.
I actually wrote a song about it when we started Dion Nib and the Agitators. On the album is a song called "Escape in the Night." So you can try to listen to that and
all right,
figure it all out.
Yes, sir.
So we got
Yeah, go ahead.
So that was when, when Lloyd came to Boston was when around the same time, it was Lloyd's 57th birthday was March 8th, 1988. And I think it was right 2 weeks before that I had gone to the audition. And the first gig coming up was one that I didn't play because it was too solemn for me to really grasp the music properly. So they used a Jamaican guy for that one. But Tommy and Jackie weren't getting along. Jackie was living in Toronto.
Yes.
So they weren't using him. They had already had a falling out since they had made the reunion. Same thing with Dizzy. Dizzy was not, and Dizzy, neither one was living nearby, so it didn't make sense to use them in they were trying to create a touring band. So I went to the audition and I got the job, but I had to wait till the next gig, which was April 30th, I believe, 1988, with Owen Gray, who I knew absolutely nothing about. Again, no clue. We went to the gig with no rehearsal, no music, no nothing. And they gave us a tape that day, and it was all lovers rock with overproduced synthesizers. And I said, which bass player is playing this? Because Brevitt didn't play electric bass, number one. And we would have taken a week to rehearse that show properly. So ultimately,
what was the outcome? I'm interested in knowing.
The outcome was an extremely late start. I think we went on, it was at a West Indies club in Trenton, New Jersey, where I was the only white guy within 6 miles of the place. And I had curry goat for the first time in my life. And got the whole, it's like a crash course in Jamaican culture, really. I've been to a few reggae shows, but it's different when everybody in the room is Jamaican and the band is the Skatalites. And everybody's probably 50 years old, Jamaican. So this is a different kind of experience, and I was loving it, but it was just, I felt bad because I knew that we were unprepared and I didn't know what was going to happen, but we did pull it off. We did end up playing mostly just Owen Gray, ska, and on the beach and stuff like, like Boogie Woogie. He was a better piano player than I am. He still is. I saw Owen. Did you lose me?
Oh, no, I'm listening and laughing.
Okay.
I knew he was a piano player. His mom taught him, yeah.
Yeah, he plays some serious piano.
Wow.
And I've been with Owen on a couple of experiences since we played with him in Jamaica in 2000, where we were on tour with Heineken Star Time. And it was him and Monty Morris and Prince Buster. And that was quite a series of shows. We also played at Jamaica House for PJ, and Carlos Malcolm performed with Ernest Ranglin and John Holt, all at Jamaica House. So that was interesting. And then we saw Owen the other day. Actually, it was almost 30 years to the day since I had played the show with him. We went playing at Neville Staples Festival over in England called Skamouth. And I walked up and he was doing this radio interview, and I realized it was the last Saturday in April, exactly 30 years to the day that I had met him. It's pretty funny.
My goodness. So he's still performing and still touring. He lives in England.
Yeah, he's alive and well that I know. I've checked on him since COVID. I think we are actually friends on Facebook, but I don't think he's on there.
I think he was born 1931. He's performing and touring. That's good. Wonderful. One of the oldest legends alive today. Yeah, the legends are really falling off the cliff.
And talk, that man can talk. You want to interview him, actually.
Yeah, it's on.
You'd have to be a series, because this man has stories and he's a good talker.
Wow, you're not kidding.
I've hung him out having breakfast with him and all that kind of stuff. Endless great stories, you know.
Wow. Yes, sir. We definitely have him on the agenda. So the number of original members of the Skatalites who you've not only performed with, but built a close relationship with, reads like a who's who and foundation Jamaican musician. So it's easier for me to mention them one by one rather than for you to just juggle your memory. So let's start with Jackie Metu, your relationship with him.
Jackie, I got to know because they wanted him when we booked the Bunny Wailer tour, which we came out in 1989 and played 5 shows in California alone with the Skatalites and Bunny Wailer. Unfortunately, Jackie had already been diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease and was in and out of the hospital frequently at that time. But the folks wanted him involved. So when I got to, everybody arrived in San Jose. And the first show was in Santa Cruz and the second show was in San Mateo, which is ironic because they're only about 30 miles apart. But, you know, you have to go over the mountains and it's just a different market. But Jackie didn't come the first day and I was really disappointed. But then he showed up the second day. So we were really thrilled. And he stayed with us for the 4 shows. We played side by side. And he, as we moved out of California, things started to go sour on the tour. We got to Minneapolis, we didn't play. We got to St. Louis and we didn't play. And then the tour split the band in half because the Skatalites were double booked. And there was another performance scheduled in Japan, which was the band's first trip to Japan. But it was only Roland, Lester, and Jackie from the actual Skatalites because nobody else had proper paperwork to leave the country yet. They hadn't, you know, if they hadn't green cards, they hadn't whatever it was that they needed to leave, so they couldn't go. So they put together Skatalites of Winston Grenin. And you see this poster has been, this picture has been posted very much recently. I think Brian just posted it the other day. So Brian Atkinson on bass guitar, Lynn Tate on guitar, Gladys Anderson on second keyboard with Jackie, and David Madden on trumpet, and Bubbles Calvin Cameron. So you had Roland Lester on horns with Bubbles and David on trumpet. So that was a horn section. And then you had Gladys and Jackie on keyboards, Lynn Tate on guitar, Winston Grenin. So it was a killer lineup. Still not the Skatalites really, but you know, everybody had a great time. And there's footage of it. There's the band called Ska Flames invited me. They own a club in Tokyo and we went and watched the footage and it is drop dead, just so hysterically funny because at some point in the show, Jackie, who got a little bit too tipsy, unfortunately, he pulled this at the Village Gate too. And he took off his shoes and his socks. He threw his socks and his shoes over the horn section's head as he disrobed, and then he proceeded to try to play with his feet.
A lot of people have stories about Jackie.
Yeah.
And most of them are not so pleasant.
But unfortunately, that's what he did during the first series of shows ever in the United States when the Skatalites played at the Village Gate with a bunch of uppity jazz snobs and shit stuff, you know, like that didn't fly at all, you know. They did not get good reviews.
Yes, so from Jackie to Judge Jerry Hines.
Jerry, I only met very briefly. Well, Jerry was playing guitar on on the first show that I saw, and I did get to meet them backstage the same night I met all the guys from Bim Scala Bim, who were also there drooling because the Skatalites had just come to town for the first time. So I got to chat with John Jerry very briefly then, but then Jerry was on the shows that I was talking about before. He was more of almost like an MC. I think he introduced us, come out or something, but he was already not really able to play by 2000. So I did meet him and hang out with him on that trip. But other than that, that was, I never got to actually play with him.
Right. Roland Alfonso.
Roland was one of the first I met, and I went to his house.
Where was he living?
In Queens, right? Kind of close to where Coxon's store was, but in Queens, not in Brooklyn. So I went to the house and he handed me a Casio, about like a 2-octave Casio. He said, let's play some music. So I didn't really know what to do. And we ended up playing, I'm not really much of a jazz player. And back then I was even less. So I didn't know what to play with him. So we ended up playing a piece that's actually Bach, but it was also recorded as a song from the 60s called How Gentle is the Rain. Dee da 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 ba 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 da ba dee. So we scored it. And he laughed just like that. He had a laugh for everybody. But one of the things I'll never forget about Roland is our first show at the Whiskey A Go-Go, when people were diving off the balcony into the stage diving onto the crowd. And Roland would do this thing where he would, when he got excited, because, Roland had 3 strokes before I met him, which I'm an occupational therapist assistant. That's what I studied. And I worked with a lot of folks with post-stroke and that kind of stuff. So it was particularly interesting to me when he told me that his first stroke, he couldn't play at all after it. But when he had the second one, he got better than he had after the first stroke. So he got to be, he was able to use both hands. And if you watched him play, you could see that, the one hand didn't work quite right, but he still was able to move those valves around. So he was, amazing guy. And Tommy, again, he wasn't always playing in the band. When I first got in the band, we only played about 10 shows in the first year. And I was puzzled because we had the same managers, Toots and the Maytals and Third World and Sister Carol and a bunch of artists were all under the same Herbie Miller. So we'd only played 10 shows, and I'll bet Herbie was only involved in the booking of about 6 of those. Other than that, it was pure West Indies clubs and that kind of stuff. Tommy was booking on his own, So finally, it was me that actually made the Bunny Wailer happen for us, because it was my friends in Boston at the Channel, which was one of the biggest clubs on the East Coast. They were the ones putting on they had been talking to originally Peter and Bunny, and then Peter got shot, and it took another 2 years, but they got Bunny to finally come out on his own. And he released that album that year, The Liberation, which won the Grammy. So anyway, Roland was just not supposed to play. Well, he didn't play that whole tour. He only played the West Coast dates of not the Bunny Wailer tour, but when we came back and did the real headline Skatalites tour. We played at Whiskey, and we played in San Diego with Let's Go Bowling and Donkey Show, and there was a big ska show. I believe the place was called the Country Club, but I was talking to somebody this weekend about this because there's people that were around during those times, and they think it was a place called Soma, which stands for something I don't know. But anyway, Roland's was picked up at the airport by my mom because she lived nearby and he was flying in for some reason a day earlier than the rest of us. So I got my mom to pick him up and she brought him to her home and he stayed there. And that man asked me every time I saw him until he died, he asked me how my mother was.
Mhm.
And he was always very family because I got friendly with his family from day one. His son Noel played awesome drums. His sister, Noel's sister Michelle, was one of the older children in the family, got very friendly with her. And there's the other son called Junior and Hermine, which is Roland's wife. You know, I was pretty close, not real close, but I always felt fond, and I felt like they felt fondly for me, you know?
Mhm. But you know, sadly, he got stroke at a very young age. I don't understand how that worked. Physically
Yeah,
fit. I think he was still living in Kingston when he got stroke the first time. Still a young man.
yeah.
Yeah. So we move on also as an extensive list. How about Tommy, sir?
Well, Tommy was one of the first, you know, I had to be cleared by Tommy. So I had already been cleared by Lloyd Nib, and he brought me to see Tommy, and that was a process that I had to endure. And it took a minute, and we didn't always see eye to eye. And at the end of the first headline tour, we had a falling out. And that's, you know, I had to leave the band. And the minute I left the band, I got a call from Winston Grenin because he said, Ken, I just spent 2 hours telling Tommy he's crazy, man. And I said, well, basically what I said to Tommy when we had the argument was, you can't fire me, I quit. So Winston grabbed me immediately, took me under his wing, but that's the next part of the story, I guess. We'll stick with the Skatalites for now.
Yes, sir.
So
Lloyd Brevitt, sir.
Lloyd Brevitt, same thing, same day, same audition, because it wasn't, you know, Roland wasn't there that day. Lester, they didn't bring the horns because it was just a rhythm section rehearsal. Brevitt was kind of shaky already, you know, both, you know, he was very frail and he was thin and he moved quite slowly and smoked endless amounts of ganja. And there was a problem always with that doghouse, as he called it, with that bass. You know, he had an upright bass. And Coxon had given him a transducer for the thing, and it just was not working properly. And it was, I don't know if it was a short, it needed to be soldered or what it was, but, you know, it was always a challenge with that thing. And it went on from the day one at the rehearsal. You know, they were having problems with getting the good sound out of the bass. But as far as, you know, once we got going and the rehearsal actually went in and he'd start kick up his shoulder there and get that. Man.
Yes, sir. And the other Lloyd, Nibs.
Well, Lloyd was my key from day one. When the minute I met the man, we got along famously. And, you know, he'd come to my father's performances actually. And well, we played in the Wilson Blue Band together for close to a year before I got him out of there. And then, of course, we did the Supersonics, and we just got closer. Oh, I got him a day job too, which was actually through a friend of mine, Ketty Bob, we call him, Bob Heffernan, gave us both the job selling antique auto parts. But Lloyd's job was for about the first 2 years, I think, he sorted engine valves because we worked for a guy who bought new old stock parts from warehouses in Australia and come by the boatload or arrive a whole trailer full of engine valve. But what the hell do they go to? So you have to sit with a cross-reference thing, and depending on which manufacturer it was, oh, this fits a 1912 Pierce arrow, and this goes to a 37 caddy, and so on and so forth. And Lloyd was literally down there for a good 18 months sorting these damn valves. And we would go rescue him every couple hours and give him lunch and smoke a spliff and all them something there.
Yes, sir. Dizzy Johnny Moore.
Oh God. Dizzy was definitely, Dizzy and Jackie, personality-wise, were my favorites. And I think I ultimately got along with them the best. Even though Lloyd and I so close, he would piss me, we would piss each other off plenty of the time, But as far as synchronization of thought, similar brain waves and that kind of stuff, me and Jackie really got along. Unfortunately, he passed away barely a year and a half after I met him. And Dizzy was not living, in US. So I didn't get to see him very much, but when I did, I was the one, and I'll pat myself on the back for this one. I was the one that brought Dizzy back into the band because those other guys didn't care. And that was obvious when he got there. And that's why he left fairly quickly, because they didn't want to treat him like he was even original. It was weird. But Dizzy, he was a great talker. He was a great player, but he was physically, not able to play as well as he could in the years that I knew him.
Right.
He had a serious problem with, I'm not sure if it was a hernia or something in his stomach. He had surgery when he was up here before he went home in the mid 80s. So his playing wasn't quite what it was in the beginning, just like a lot of them. I mean, obviously the years catch up with you. Depending on your instrument, you just can't play it as well.
Right. Cedric I.M. Brooks.
Oh, goodness. Cedric, I had heard about Cedric because Cedric showed up at a New Year's Eve party that they played, which Skatalites have not played very much on New Year's Eve at all, but they did once in Miami or somewhere in Florida. Must have been Miami area. So his name was on the poster, and I knew that he was going to be there, but I didn't know anything about him really. And then, of course, Cedric and Cedric came along right when I rejoined the band. So here, fast forward to 1998, that's when I came back. I left in mid 90, right after the big tour. And then I was working in various things. And then all of a sudden the Skatalites, Tommy died in May of 98. And Roland died, as you well know, after his performance at the Key Club. He died at Mount Sinai Hospital, I believe, November 20th, I believe. So there was even shows that year that I played on that, and Cedric played a couple of shows at the tail end. I think there was one in Cambridge, and that was the first time I met Cedric, and we just played at the Middle East, I believe. So then we both started touring Europe together with the band. The band had already been established for a few years, so that the market was very strong, and they were going 3 and 4 times a year, which we still are going 3 and 4 times a year to Europe. And so that's when we really started to play together, and I started to understand who he even was and all of his other previous projects, and Light of Saba and Mystic Revelation of Rastafari and Flash Forward and all of these various things that he's done that, and his playing, of course, he always sounded kind of like a cross between the two, Tommy and Roland, but he also had that more African influence.
Yes, he was Afrocentric, man.
And that was, we always would wind up at jam sessions, especially if they gave us a day off. We create a party and a jam session, or we get invited somewhere. So that's when I really started to understand all of that about him. He was really, and jazz, he was very jazzical and very knowledgeable of all of it.
Right. Now, I have my own small story to tell about him. Now, when he joined the Skatalites, he told me Skatalites was trying.
He was living in LA.
Yes, Skatalites trying to
yeah.
recruit him, but he's been reluctant, uncertain. And this is my selling point. I said to him, have you been to Japan? Have you been to London, Paris, and all these countries? And I said, you know what? You compromise. I don't know how many more years you're going to have on this planet Earth. You go with the Skatalites, you get to know all these countries. So put aside, you know, make everything secondary. You don't like these guys, that's all right. You just deal with it and go. And he said, Junior, I'm going to look into it. Next, you know, he joined the Skatalites. Yes,
and
he'll travel the world.
They loved him so much in every damn one too, especially Russia.
Mm-hmm. But he was an intellectual giant. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had either a master or a bachelor's degree, but he had studied extensively.
Yeah. He knew about drumming. He could play upright bass. He could play all kinds of stuff. Like
deep in his African culture and roots. Yes, sir. So we move on now. How about those who are still in the flesh? Let's start with Lester. Perhaps he's the senior member of all the musicians that are alive now, right? I could be wrong. Was he born 1938, 39?
36. January 31st, 1936.
So he's perhaps one of the oldest musician alive today.
Of the Skatalites. Well, except for Ernie, if you call, you know, Ernie always says he's a Skatalite. Those guys said not officially, but Ernie's 89.
Mm-hmm.
And could probably play a show if we got enough money for him.
Right. So, okay. So, and who, Carlos, Malcolm, is a few of them around that age group. 36. And how is Lester?
Dennis Sindri's still alive. And
okay.
Fred Campbell, they have the band.
Yes.
Fred Campbell, Herman Sang, Keezy, and
so those are guys who were born now in the early to mid 30s.
They have a band called Ska Jams.
No, I mean in terms of birth, they were born.
I don't know about Herman and those guys, but I'm assuming. I mean, they were recording with Prince Buster before Skatalites existed. So.
Yeah, they go back there. There you go. Yeah. And how is Lester doing, sir, for the benefit of my benefit and the benefit of his fans?
Lester was in ICU in June, but he was immediately discharged and put in rehab. I just spoke to him the other day, last week, and he was doing much better. But you know, COVID has shut down gyms and stuff, and that was something that Lester was doing every day. He was going to the gym. And when he stopped, I guess he started to gain weight, and you know, he's not as mentally active because he's not going out of the house. He's not doing, you know, you need to keep some kind of routine going, I think, at that age. And when it stops and you're shut down and basically sitting around the house, it can't be mentally or physically good for you, you know?
Not at all, sir, not at all. And how about Miss Schaefer, sir, Doreen?
Doreen is doing very well. She's very frustrated because, you know, I had to send her home from the tour in 2019 because I couldn't stand the look on her face. She has to have her knees replaced again. She's in pain. And she's the kind of person that she wouldn't complain. She wouldn't tell me she's going to leave the tour. So I said, Doreen, you need to go home. I can't stand the look on your face because I know you're in pain. So we had hoped, you know, that she would go home and have her surgery and be back out with us not too long afterwards. But along came the COVID. And now here we are 18 months later, and it's barely possible for her to even go into a facility to have the surgery. And I don't think anybody's really dying to hang out in the hospital these days. And then another 2 months of rehab in a nursing home. I think she's going to wait until the coast is clear, which none of us know at this point how clear it's ever going to be. But, you know, she's anxious to come. She's, you know, we're scheduled for Freedom Sound Festival in Germany next year. And she would see a lot of her cronies, Dr. Ringding. She's been performing with Dr. Ringding in Germany since the mid-90s. And The Stingers have just been booked on that festival now. Doreen was performing with the Stingers. They're dying to have her come sing a tune with them, and she's dying too. But we just have to wait and see what can be allowed, and what if she can get her knee surgery done. That'd be the main part.
Right. And how about Vin Gordon?
Vin's doing well. Vin's in Paris, ready to move, boy. He calls me every week. Like, what's going on? It's like, well, it depends on, they just shut down Europe again.
Right.
Buck from the Toasters told me he just lost all of his October stuff in Europe, just like the other day. So and London and, England, UK and Europe, the mainland, shut down. So, and who knows, like I said, we're scheduled to play in April over there next year, but we don't know what's going to happen. So everybody's in the same thing. It's like, well, should we bother rescheduling all this so that we can turn around and change it all again? But what else are we going to do? I know I'm going back to Panama for another winter.
Oh, you mean to perform or live?
Well, both. When I was down there last winter, I told you a little about it, I believe. I was in, there's a studio down there where Dan Vitale is from Bim Scala Bim. There's a guy with a studio. I'm going to see that guy next week. Actually, he's from Northern California and he's home right now.
In Panama, of all places.
In Panama, we're recording Calypso, mostly Calypso. And there's a guy called Calypso Joe. And there's a lot of old Calypsonians hanging around in Panama and the Costa Rican border there. Which, aren't you Costa Rican?
Me? No, so unfortunately, I'm Jamaican.
I thought father was Costa Rican or something.
No, my generation now, about on my mom's side, I think 8 generation grew up same place in the hills of Manchester. Because I know 4, they talk about another 3, same place. And my dad is about 4 generations, same place in the pristine hills of Manchester.
Wow. Then there's pure rumor flying around then.
Yeah.
Yes. Plus he speaks Spanish and everybody's trying to make an excuse for why.
Okay. And I have a good secretary who does my translation.
Yeah.
Very brilliant. Yes, as we move along, sir, Larry McDonald.
Oh God, Larry and I met back when he went on the session and got back involved with the band in the mid-90s. He's on the High Bob Ska, and he started showing up at shows, and I see him here, I see him there. Legends of Ska. I get to know him a lot better at Legends of Ska, and more and more, we try and use him whenever we're in the city, and now he's officially back in the band. Right. He's going to be on the tour coming up.
Nice.
And it's always such a pleasure. Of course, monumental history again, almost 30 years with Gil Scott Heron during the prime years of Gil Scott Heron's career. You'll see him in a lot of videos in that stuff. It's really cool. Yes, but also was like a good friend of Bob. I don't know that he even actually played for Bob, but I know they were friends because I saw a picture of them when Bob and him were quite young. And I'm not sure of the playing history there, but of course, Carlos Malcolm and the Careeves and all that history there. And did you interview him or somebody interviewed? Maybe it was Roger. I don't know. I saw him talking a lot of.
No, I've not interviewed either one.
Yeah, somebody interviewed him, and he was talking a lot about how difficult it was to show up with a conga drum in Jamaica, because that wasn't what people were really using back then. It was either a keti drum or timbale, or just conga people. And so I enjoyed his story about his struggles to make the conga an acceptable instrument in the studio.
Succeeded.
Yeah.
Gallantly succeeded.
He also, and he missed the whole rocksteady period because he was in Mexico.
Oh, I thought it was in New York. Okay. Because that's where I met him. Mexico.
Okay.
So Mr. Douglas, Val Douglas then.
Val, I met personally when he was playing for Toots in the mid-90s. And his reputation had well preceded him, because the first bass player that I ever played with reggae with was John Kilroy. Val Douglas was one of his idols. So he always told me, oh, and we listened to certain tracks with Val on them. I don't always know, but you can usually tell if the bass playing gets real interesting, it's probably Val. And he just has, he's got an ear that is beyond comparison, I think. Val, when we do sound check, and sometimes a certain frequency will make a piece of or even the furniture rattle. And Val will say, oh, that's that frequency. And he tells the sound man what knob to touch to fix that problem. He's got an incredible ear.
Mm-hmm.
And his playing is also obviously quite good.
My goodness. The timekeeper, Trevor Sparrow Thompson.
Sparrow came along when Lloyd Nib had some surgery back a couple of years before he passed away. I didn't know Sparrow. A lot of people know Sparrow from way back when, but I didn't. And I met Sparrow when he came and played with us in Lloyd, and it was interesting because Lloyd was well enough and we had the money to bring the two of them on a tour in Europe. So Lloyd was there basically to support, emotional support, call it, or whatever. But Lloyd was so concerned that the job be done properly that he wanted to be there. So we had the two of them, and Sparrow, of course, did a great job. This was 2008. And it was a fairly short tour in Europe, maybe 2-3 weeks. But Sparrow, of course, loved the job. And we didn't see him again very much until, unfortunately, when Lloyd passed away. He was the first person that we thought of.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so the Skatalites have also joined many other singers over the years, both in recording and on stage. Can you talk about that a little bit? So a few of the people you have worked with, the Skatalites rather have worked with.
Well, the first one was Owen Gray.
Mm-hmm.
The next was that, I believe, those shows in Jamaica where we played with, well, we didn't actually back them though. They were backed by, we did do some kind of rehearsal and a couple of songs with Prince Buster, because I remember the rehearsal. And it was, Ken Booth for the Bashaka album, which we've just re-released. Ken Booth has a tune on that, and Bob Andy came to that session, but Bob Andy and the producer didn't agree, and the tune was great, and I was so disappointed. And I found the tune. He cut the tune with somebody else, and it's good, but it's
not like
it's just like some electric drum or some, just nothing like what ours was. But it was called The Original Dancehall. And he talks about how ska was the original dancehall music. And Bob was I really loved him heartily. He was very, very nice man. And ultimately a very wise man, because he knew better than to work with that producer and certainly to take a check from him. That's a whole chapter in my book.
Yes, you're not kidding. You also work with drummer Winston Grenin and guitarist Lynn Tate. Can you tell us about that project?
Well, that's all because I met, before I even met any of the Skatalites, early on, right after I saw Burning Spear, and I joined the Wilson Blue thing in Providence, they were opening most of the shows for the reggae shows. So one of the first artists that we played support for and I met was Toots. And there was Winston Grenin on drums, and there was Andy Basford on guitar. which I knew about Andy because Andy also played in a local New England band. Andy's from Connecticut. The band was called Cool Runnins, and they were very good too. So, and I was playing, we had played shows. I think I had met Andy one time before. We actually met through Toots. So when I was standing there, I was neither surprised, but very pleased that I knew somebody else in the mix.
Right.
So meanwhile, I'm waiting to meet this guy Toots. And I'm thinking, all right, it's probably another older graying Jamaican with dreadlocks. So I'm sitting in the room and we're talking, people are, we're doing the sound checks or getting ready. And so finally I'm like, where's Toots? And one of the people in the room says, me that man. And I was like, wait a minute, this guy looks like he's 35.
That's all right.
And I don't know how much older he was in that time. I guess he was probably maybe mid 40s, but I just expected something, and he had no dreads. So, I mean, I know now that certainly plenty of Jamaican people and certainly reggae players and stuff, but that back then it was like, okay, Bob Marley has dreads, Dennis Brown has dreads, all these guys have dreads. So I'm expecting someone with dreads. So it's just very funny. And he just looks so young. He probably looked more like 25, really. He looked like his son's brother, not the father. And the son was in the room too. And that was the thing. I was like, oh, you guys are brothers, right? And then the three girls, which, I'm still very friendly with Liba. Unfortunately, Melody passed away.
Right, unfortunately. So.
And I haven't seen Genevieve, I think her name is. I haven't seen her since she left the band in the 90s, I guess. So I guess she went to sing gospel or something like that. But anyway, back to the Winston Grenin. So Winston, I saw he had his local band going on because Winston Grenin and the Ska Rocks. And they used to play at this place in Cambridge called the Western Front, which was one of the most famous reggae clubs. The man that owned it, Marvin Gilmore, is 97 years old, still promoting and sponsoring reggae music, and just opened a cannabis dispensary.
Wow. Perhaps one of the oldest institutions in America playing reggae music continuously, I'm guessing.
Very, very interesting situation. But so eventually, as I said before, when I ended up leaving the Skatalites the first time, Winston was very upset with Tommy. He said, "You're a fool to let that guy go." And then, of course, called me up and grabbed me himself. So he knew that I had a feel for other stuff just besides the music. I always kind of had a feel for the business, and I work pretty well with people, and I could usually find out a few things and help people get from point A to point B in their career or whatever. So he had me join the band, but it was kind of rinky-dink stuff, small pay, long drives. Winston lived in Woodstock, New York, and I live in Boston. So right away, you're talking a good 4-hour drive, which that means coming back from a gig, probably no, and hotel budget, no. So if you want to sleep on the couch or under the bus, maybe you can. It was interesting.
Yes,
but I always loved the band. That's the thing. Always here's Lynn Tate. Sometimes it was Lynn Tate and Andy Basford, and then Stewie from the Cables. I believe his name is Earl Stewart. Maybe they call him Stewie.
Right.
He was one of the vocalists from the. Hold on. Oh, what's going on here now? Hold on a second. Apparently the plug that I've been plugged into is not on.
Oh, but maybe I should use this opportunity to remind our viewers that I'm presently in conversation with the great Ken Stewart. He's been honing his skills for, since their early 80s, as a professional working with the Skatalites. Yes, sir. So I think pick up where we left off. We were talking about, I think,
Winston.
yeah, in and out of.
Oh, no, Stewie.
Yes,
So
right.
Stewie from the
After,
Cables,
still with the Cables when they play, I guess, occasionally they.
he
work
came
with
and he lived in Winston's apartment with him.
them.
And he stayed there so long. Winston had a problem keeping bass players. I'm not quite sure why, but he was always changing bass players. So Stewie got so frustrated and he stayed so long, he learned how to play the bass for the damn band.
You're not kidding. Yes, sir. It'd be interesting to know a little bit about Lynn Tate, that genius, that brilliant guitarist,
amazing guy.
From the Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago.
He was
you
a
work with him as well,
character.
Right? You have worked with him.
Oh yeah. Well, the first time I met Lynn was when we did a show in Toronto with Roy Shirley,
wow,
the Skatalites, and Desmond Decker and the Aces.
And about what time period that now?
That was 1990, shortly before Jackie died, and put together basically by myself and Jackie, whoever promoter, but as far as the promoter talking to the Skatalites part of the thing, but the problem was, again, by now Lloyd Nib had enough paperwork that he could go to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And Lloyd Brevitt did as well, but Tommy could not. So Tommy, we couldn't have our band leader there. So it was immediately agreed that Lynn Tate would lead the band, because it was actually, a lot of them said that he should have been the band leader from the beginning. And Dizzy always laughs about it because he says, yeah, well, we didn't want Tate to lead the band because he was Trinidadian. And instead we got Tommy, who's Cuban.
But I think it was such a profound loss for the music fraternity in Jamaica, the music growth and development, and also personally for Lynn Tate when he left for Canada. Because he left what, 68, just in the middle of Rocksteady, he just up and gone.
Yeah, that was kind of weird because that was like he was just starting to get some notoriety and working with what's his name now?
Well, he had gotten plenty though. Remember, he played on some of the biggest songs during the Rocksteady era. He's on practically all the big ones.
What's his name? Johnny Nash.
Mm-hmm.
The Johnny Nash tune, "Hold Me Tight," was
right. He's on. Mm-hmm.
And that was a hit in the United States of America. I don't know if anybody actually knew that when they played on it that it was a hit, but.
Mm-hmm. So I guess he doesn't tarry one place long. Okay, I live in Jamaica for a couple of years. I'm gone, Toronto. And there was not much happening in Canada at the time. I think Canada kills Korea more than anything else. If you look at some of the guys who have lived there, Jackie Mittoo, Leroy Sybil, Stranger Call, they weren't able, and Lynn Tate, they weren't able to really make any headway and create impression.
Lynn wasn't that interested in that part of his career. He was more making money as an arranger. And he would get hired by people totally out of the genre to arrange their music.
I see.
That's why we didn't really, he was still successful, but he didn't necessarily do a lot in reggae or Jamaican music.
Mm-hmm. Well, before I turn things over, some fun question to our producer, Eric. You've also known and worked closely with singer Dion Nibs, and he's the son of Lloyd. That would be my last question, right?
Okay.
Yeah, you have worked with him. Tell us a little bit about him. I think I'd ask you about Dion off air, that he's such a great singer, and why he hasn't made a name or impact in a more profound way, so to speak.
I don't know. Dion, I met Dion on the first headline on the Bunny Wailer tour. He performed there at Irvine Meadows when we did the show with Bunny and the tour with Bunny. And I was so impressed that obviously if we were going to do another tour, mind you, the first year I spent previously, year and a half almost, was without any singer in the Skatalites. There was no vocals.
Mhm.
So the show was not, I mean, there was Owen Gray at the Owen Gray show, but in a normal Skatalites show, we didn't have a regular vocalist. So that was kind of boring for the fans, I think, you know. They were definitely interested in hearing some lyrics.
Right. And you
So-
sense that, I suppose.
So when Dion showed up now and he's singing songs like Cry Me a River by Jackie Opal, and literally had the, you know, like he could have had the girls eating out of his hand. There was, you know, Irvine Meadows was crazy. They were just screaming, and almost like girls that see the Beatles or something. His voice was really impressive. And when we did that slow ballad, it really stood out even more than the regular Jackie Opal songs like Welcome You Back Home and that kind of stuff. So I was immediately impressed, and Dion ended up going home, and then he came back to live here permanently within about 2 years.
Mhm.
So then he joined Tommy in the Skatalites, and I was already gone from the Skatalites, but I was living in Boston, and so was Dion. So we saw each other. And then ultimately he had a falling out with Tommy too. So he didn't want to perform with the Skatalites, and we started ultimately a year or two later, started the band known as Tion Nib and the Agitators. So that was, you know, that was we met a couple of guys that been in a band called Steady Ernest, which was an offshoot of the band I mentioned before called Bim Scala Bim.
Mhm.
Same lead singer, Dan Vitale. Big up, Dan. So Dan is the person that I stay with in Panama. He owns a small resort in Panama.
I'm sure he'll be watching this when it's uploaded.
Isla Bastimentos in Bocas del Toro. So there was the bass and drum from that band. We're trying to put together this thing. And there was me and Dion trying to do our thing. So we all came together and said, all right, let's do this. So the first rehearsal was a demo. We made a demo tape, bang. And we had gigs within 2 months. We opened for Toots.
Wow.
And we started to take off pretty heavy because the music was huge. Boston, again, was one of the meccas of ska and reggae for most of the 80s and 90s. It was just huge. And we played everywhere, and we did this and that, and we started going to New York and going to Philadelphia and traveling around. And then all of a sudden, Roland passed away, or Tommy and Roland both passed away in 1998. And I was, you know, hearing rumors like they wanted me back. And of course, you know, I saw Lloyd all the time, and he always said he wanted me to come back to the band. And then Lloyd Brevitt started to really make noise with the management that he wanted me back in the band. I think they were a little bit lost. They had management, but they didn't have, you know, that, because Tommy was the manager, sort of, but he was really just the band leader.
Mhm.
So they didn't have a band leader. And that certainly wasn't my role, but Cedric kind of took over that role, even though, you know, it kind of looked like maybe Lester was the band leader, but Cedric was really the band leader when he came back to the band, or came to the band. And so that was, I kind of lost my train of thought there for a second.
Yeah, but that's all right. So it's been a little while. So, you know, it's a huge pleasure to introduce producer and good friend Eric Kohler. He has some fun questions he wants to throw your way.
Hello, Ken.
Greetings.
Great to see you again.
Yeah, man.
I in honor of Devin and Roger and their Reggae Pod Clash, I'm wearing their shirt because I really enjoyed the interview that you did on there. Learned a lot from you. And
We just found out that we're going to play with the Agrolites Friday night at the Punk Rock Bowling.
oh, in Vegas.
They've changed the order and situation a little bit. So we'll be, I was just talking to Roger on Facebook a few.
Nice.
Yeah, we both going to see, because we were just together at Supernova.
Yeah.
Well, Agrolites has
super cool.
been one of my favorite bands in the genre since they started.
Oh, yes.
I'm right there with you. And Skatalites have always been near and dear to me, and I've had the pleasure of seeing them Unfortunately, not ever with Tommy. He was when I saw them, he was I think it was in the mid-90s. He might have already been sick or out for a little while, but they've always been near and dear. And thanks to you and even Brian Keogh, I've had a chance to meet a number of the legends over the years, and I enjoy the back and forth with you and Junior talking about little anecdotes about some of them. To touch on a couple that Junior did not ask you about, talk a little bit about Ernest Ranglin.
Well, Ernest, of course, is one of the best guitarists in the world by far. I was listening to an album with him and Monty from, I think it's from the late 70s, called Gemento. And they play a George Benson song on it. And it's kind of funny because he's playing circles around George Benson's.
You're allowed to say that, we can get arrested.
I'm sorry, and there's an album called Wranglin' Roots.
Yes, yeah, I'm familiar with that one.
That's jazz fusion. That I cannot believe that nobody got a hold of that or got wind of their abilities at that time. Of course, Monty was always on the jazz circuit.
Sure.
But Wranglin' Roots isn't Monty. It's only Ernest and Val Douglas on bass.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of seeing Ranglin did some stuff with Joey Altrude out here.
Right.
I had a chance to see him there.
Lloyd Nib was on those sessions.
Yes.
About the Buru Jazz.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Come on, Joey. We're waiting.
We've talked to Joey about that. I have a burned copy of some of those.
I did too, but my computer that is stuck in it won't boot up anymore. So mad.
Well, maybe if I dig mine out, maybe I'll burn it for you. Talk about Monty Alexander, who also recorded with the Skatalites.
Well, actually, I didn't finish talking about Rang.
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
I just wanted to mention, I did mention it briefly, but we didn't perform together at the Jamaica House in 2000, but he was there performing with his own little combo or whatever. So I did converse with him and got to know him a little bit. I don't think I had met him before that, but he had been, I think, they had already made the Ball of Fire album, but I wasn't on those sessions, so I didn't get to participate and meet him then. So he was always particularly, and most of them were like this, they just kind of take you under their wing and immediately be friendly and just.
Sure.
And then I would see him here and there. And I saw him at the Blue Note when he was playing with Monty, and he immediately, oh, how you doing? And got me into a little bit of trouble. I'm not even going to tell that part of the story.
All right.
He was trying to misbehave and I was trying to help him and I got in trouble for it. Troublemaker, Ranger. Anyway, who's the next person now?
Oh, Monty Alexander.
Okay, so Monty, I guess I met him at the Roscoe Gordon concert. Oh, no, it was okay. So I had a band with Lester. Lester invited me to be the keyboard player when he started the band called the Lester Sterling and the Ska Maka, which had very few performances, but the first major one was at SOB's in Manhattan in about 1993. And Roscoe Gordon was there. And Coxon was a big supporter of Lester in this new project. So Coxon had brought Roscoe Gordon, Herbie Miller was there with Monty. There was all kinds of folks in the audience. And Scofflaws opened. I think I met Buford O'Sullivan that night. And Victor Rice.
Okay, sure.
So that was the first time I met Monty, and then didn't really see him too much. And then when I came back to the band in, I don't know, it was probably late 99, early 2000s, we played a show at SOB's again, and he showed up and he came up and played with me, unannounced, unrehearsed.
That's cool. That's great. You're an honor. Yeah.
And he's talked about having me come play with him, but that hasn't happened yet. I look forward to that very much. I hope it'll happen someday.
Yeah, yeah. No,
But
he's amazing.
Oh, I enjoyed very much. He did these 20 sessions, kind of like what you guys are doing. You know, he'd
I watched a little storytelling. Yeah, I love it.
reminiscing in rhythm. It's available on YouTube. There's 20 of them, and
I have to find him.
Yeah,
he talks about how Frank Sinatra took him under his wing.
yeah.
And that's how he got his whole, like, playing in Vegas for Frank Sinatra. Like,
It's incredible.
you gotta
Stories. Yeah,
meet all these
Yeah.
people. And,
yeah. We're gonna try to get Monty for this too.
but I'm friends with this famous piano player called Roger Calloway. Actually, he's went to school with my dad.
Oh,
And Roger plays the piano at the beginning and the end of All in the Family, this TV
sure.
show.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
He worked with Bobby Darin as an arranger. He scored the Chris Christopherson, Barbra Streisand, Star is Born. So anyway, Monty told me that he introduced Roger to his wife, and Roger was good friends and still is with so many other musicians. And it's one of these cats, kind of like Phil Chen. He's another one.
Sure.
Everybody you meet
Yeah.
in the music business, they know this man. Whether they play polka or whatever they play, they know this guy.
Right. Right. Yeah, we're fortunate to have Phil Chin living here in Los Angeles. So our previous guest was Norma Frazier, who's also worked with you.
Norma is one of my favorite people. I enjoyed her interview. I watched that very closely.
She's
I bet
so sweet.
If our timing was a little better, we would be playing a show together up in Eugene on October 2nd, but it didn't fall quite right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. Timing is everything. Talk about the experience at Legends of Ska, that massive show that Brad Klein put together, and obviously a documentary that we've seen pieces of, but I know it's not out yet.
Well, if I can blow my own horn for a second, I helped Brad, align all the musicians and get them all there and all of that. And I wasn't really supposed to perform, or I wasn't, and I told Brad that I didn't need any money. I think I asked him to pay for one night or for the hotel if I came up, and I drove there in my car because Toronto isn't that far. So I made a nice trip out of it and went through New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York, and then got there to just the most amazing experience I think I've had ever in my musical career.
Yeah.
All of these people that I've only heard about, and they're still alive and well and really able to perform. And people like Patsy, nobody had seen her in 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
She hadn't touched a microphone in 40 years, but the minute she did, it sounded like the voice right on the record.
Yeah. The footage of Patsy and Stranger.
Board creator.
Yep.
I mean, there was so many people I hadn't met. Wilson. What's his name? First name? Wilson and Higgs.
Roy Wilson.
Yes, Roy Wilson. Hadn't met him. Of course, Justin Hines, who I had met, and that's how I met Vin Gordon.
Okay, yeah.
And, when Justin was always one of my favorite vocalists ever, and Alton, Prince Buster, all these people.
The who's who.
Well, and the musicians as well, most of which I did know. I didn't know Jojo Bennett, met him. Little Guinier, Bobby Guinier was there, didn't know him. Only all these people's reputation had preceded them.
Yeah. You knew Rico, obviously, right?
Oh yes.
Rico, talk about Rico.
Oh God. Rico and I became friends immediately. Again, Rico came through with Jazz Jamaica in '94, and I saw him again shortly after when I started touring in Europe. And then we saw each other in Japan and we became friends. And Rico, I left the band for a short time in 2010-ish. And Rico called me up. He said, "Ken, if you start a band, I want to be in it." He loved me for some reason.
Such a nice.
He was great. I helped him get food and ganja in Japan, which getting ganja in Japan can be a real.
I'm sure.
So ever since that, I was like, I could do no wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. We had the pleasure to work with him a few times, and a little road trip from Sierra Nevada World Music Fest down to Los Angeles. And yeah, Rico.
And a couple of shows out here.
Yeah, some shows out here.
He was one of the sweetest men.
Yes, sir.
100%. Agreed. Yeah. Here's a question.
Humble.
Yes. Yes.
And
Can't say anything. Chan Thornton, sure.
The three, the Michael Bammy Rose, Tan, Rico, and that's the other thing. So you had Legends of Ska. That was my first honor, and I didn't finish the story because I wasn't supposed to perform, but when I was there and they saw me there, they're like, no, Ken has to play, especially on the Skatalites instrumentals. They wanted me on the keyboard.
Wow.
So I got to play, and I'm in the film.
What an honor. Yeah.
So the same thing basically happened in London in 2007. They put together the Alpha School thing, and I helped them round up all the people, but I wasn't necessarily supposed to play. But he did pay my plane fare to come over and hang out. So I got there and hang out. And Rico.
Wow.
I don't care if that guy's Jamaican or not. Ken Stewart's playing keyboards for our second, blah, blah, blah.
I love it.
I was very honored.
Yeah.
Well, Charles, man, if Charles is listening,
Yes.
we love each other. The keyboard in question, we know each other well, you know?
Yeah. Nice.
That
So
was funny though.
So a question from a mutual friend, Ernesto out here, Ernesto Arce. He's asking for you to talk about how Jackie Me Too taught you the right chords after you played something close for years.
Yeah, well, Tommy's charts weren't always so accurate. You know, they were rearrangements. They weren't necessarily what the specific instance I'm going to refer to is Jackie kind of changed the arrangement too, but it was so sweet the way he did it. I really liked it, and I remembered it. So that when I rejoined the band and we recut the Guns of Navarone, the From Paris with Love version is this new arrangement with some slightly different chord changes. If you listen to the original,
Okay.
or you even listen to I think it's on High Bop, they remade it, which is twice as fast as the original. So we brought the tempo back down in the From Paris Love with Love one, but we changed the chords in the bridge slightly to this Jackie Me Too thing that he had taught me. And there was a couple tunes, I guess, that he straightened me out, some transitional chord.
Right.
Because it was always, you know, Jackie had evolved immensely in the time from when he played in the Skatalites to what the first years. Then obviously there was 30 years of growth and development and musical knowledge.
Of course. Yeah. How did you become obviously a player, a musician, and you did allude to that you've always been business minded, but how did you become the manager of the Skatalites?
Oh God. After we made Bashaka, and those guys made that guy the manager of the band as well as the label owner, things started to go sour.
Right.
Because I had always had some slight managerial role. From the Bunny Wailer tour, they decided I was going to be the road manager. Just by default, this guy's American, we're in America, he's got, you know, just helping them do whatever. So I was appointed road manager of that tour. And then I put together, basically, without being the manager or having any title, it was me that put together the next tour. I was the one that called up Kevin Morrow. I called George Michaelo, who was the biggest agent in the country back then, Fast Lane International. he had Burning Spear, he
Sure.
had,
Yep.
he had everybody, Lucky Dubé, he had all these artists that were huge. So I called George, and he's like, I can't do it, Ken. He said, call this guy. This guy just did all my West Coast dates with Spear. So that was Kevin Morrow.
Mhm.
At that time, Kevin Morrow had his office in the upstairs office of the Belly Up.
Okay.
He hadn't gone, he had Falk and Morrow was the
Sure.
agency.
Yeah.
Sam Falk died, and then Kevin went to work for House of Blues. And of course, now is one of the biggest bookers in all of Live Nation. I'm not sure actually if he's still there, but
Yeah. No, I think he moved back out here and is doing some
yeah, I
solo
think he's
stuff,
got
but
his
he's still
own
active.
little-
He does.
yeah,
He has his own
got
company.
his
Yeah.
own little thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the start of that. And then, well, I've kind of lost my train of thought.
Oh, you as the manager.
Yeah, well, okay, so the whole thing with basically this guy produced our album and then started bouncing checks and everything started falling apart. But they had made him the manager on paper. But because he actually wrote bad checks, he was criminally, we could get out of the contract because he committed a criminal act. Plus, basically with those guys, if you're the money source, you're the manager. So I just made sure I started getting gigs because I knew this guy couldn't do that.
Right.
And I knew, so I just got gigs. So that, but I also, and it was actually, we played Reggae in the Park in San Francisco. And that's when I actually came with paperwork and said, all right, guys. Oh, the other thing, my car got repossessed. And it was a particularly embarrassing situation because I was actually camping in a campground with my daughter. And I left the campground to go to my girlfriend's house for a minute. Or it was like an hour away. So I'm at my girlfriend's and I come out to go back to the campground and the car is gone. So they'd come and repossessed it. And that was all because of this guy.
Oh,
So I was fed up.
sure.
Enough is enough.
And it was always a matter of they knew I was good at what I did, but they didn't want to let me have the title. And as far, supposedly I was the road manager officially back then, but the other alleged manager didn't even know what backline meant. He didn't have any skills. He was just a big blowhard, mouth.
Right.
So he couldn't do squat. So I started to prove myself and look, I'm the manager. Sign this paper. And that was that.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and listen, I mean, you've done wonders and you've kept the
That
band
was
going.
because that was at that point. But at that point, there was no Tommy, there was no band leader.
Right.
It was Lloyd Brevitt, Lloyd Knibb, and Lester, who none of really had. I mean, Lloyd Knibb was the one who always pretty much, it was Lloyd's idea to have the band. But he knew from day one he couldn't lead it. So he got Tommy to lead.
Right.
And that's kind of the way it went until
Yeah.
Tommy died. So then it's like, all right, now what? So they made me the official manager, and I started going. I've known every aspect of the music business because of my dad, because I was always going to shows with him since I was old enough to walk.
Sure.
So I always got every aspect of what was going on. I actually was a promoter when I was 14. I hired two of my friends' rock bands, and I rented the Grand Army Hall and had a concert. I was in 8th grade.
From a young age, yeah.
Yes.
So, and to this day, are you still managing them, or is there
Yes,
someone
I
else involved?
am. I have an assistant or a business partner, and we're co-managing. She helps me with most of the internet type stuff and complicated stuff that I don't really want to deal with, and it's menial stuff that I don't want to deal with.
And that's Flo, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Shout out to Flo. Yeah.
Flo. Flo.
I think she's over in Europe, right?
She's in Genova, yes.
Okay.
She's actually has a work visa to be here, but they won't let her leave and use it.
Because of COVID?
I wrote a letter to the Italian government in June to justify her coming back over.
Oh,
They still haven't approved it.
yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah.
So anyway, I did hire a management company, an official one for a while, and that didn't quite go the way we wanted it to. So I wound up back in the saddle.
There you go.
It is wonderful to see just the the continued involvement of the legends and the foundation artists and those that have been there from the early on. Like right now, obviously having Larry McDonald and whenever you can get Ben Gordon and obviously some of the others, and Doreen, looking forward to having her back. As far as the Skatalites name itself, I mean, how does that work, and who like controls the name, and just thinking about the future of the Skatalites, because we've lost so many musicians, right? So many legends over the years, outside of the music that we're talking about, but just as far as thinking ahead about the future of the Skatalites.
The name was trademarked by Lloyd Nib on behalf of everybody, but it's his part of his estate.
Okay.
So right now, the way it works is I technically lease the use of the name from the Nib family. And if maybe not everybody's happy with that, but there's nobody really coming saying that. I mean, not anybody that matters.
Sure, of course.
It might be people that's saying something about it, but
yeah,
no families, nobody's objecting, nobody's saying, hey, this guy's screwing up everything. Certainly I could think the band could be doing better in many ways, whether me personally or, I mean, just the way this wonderful business works. What we have to do,
which gets more and more challenging as the days go on. But the carrying the torch and you think of any other working band that's been out there continuous over the years from that area, there is none. So that's a huge credit to everyone that Junior asked you about, everyone that you've worked with, everyone that we've talked about.
All I know, what makes me the proudest is when when another veteran Jamaican musician compliments me on what I'm doing.
Sure, I bet.
Whether that be musically, personally, with the band, or business-wise with the band. People like, I don't know, Robbie Lynn or something,
Yeah, no, I could imagine.
He sees that we're on tour with Stranger Cole and says, oh, I want to come up. I'm going to be at that show. I want to come up and play the harmonica on Rough and Tough.
Oh,
that
wow.
makes me feel good, man.
Of course, as it should. So talking about what's ahead for the band. Recently, you worked with Jump Up Chuck and reissued the album that you talked about. What else is upcoming outside of, I know that you're on tour, but what else can fans be on the lookout for? We've got a bunch of songs in the can that were recorded to be voiced by Doreen. Mm-hmm. And this delay in they were recorded at some of them most of them at Tough Gong. Oh. After we got off the boat from Damian Marley's cruise, mm-hmm. we went to this Tough Gong studio and recorded with Ken Booth. Mm. And with Peter Austin from the Clarendonians. Yes. Nice. But we're trying to.
And what kind of sounds, sir?
All mostly. Well, see, this was the thing is Doreen's never made it. There's never been an album, Doreen, Schaefer, and the Skatalites. So most of these tunes are the tunes that you see and hear Doreen performing with us most of the night. If she didn't do them with somebody else already, we felt like she should do them with us. And we're talking about also some of her tone, remaking some of her tunes that she had with Jackie, and Adorable You, and Welcome You Back Home,
that would be amazing.
The Vow. this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Nice.
Wow.
the classics.
Yep. Yep.
Because as Toots constantly told me, he said, Ken, don't listen to him. Don't worry about new tune. Keep recording, re-recording your big hits.
Wow.
It's good advice.
Oh, yeah, you're not kidding.
It worked for him.
Yes.
And I'm on the only Grammy-winning record I play on is his.
Oh,
Yes.
and I love
Right,
it.
right,
I love it
right,
from start
right,
to
right,
finish,
right,
yeah.
right,
True
right.
love, baby.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're not kidding.
Never
Yes.
grow old, and he never
Yes.
did, man. The guy
Yeah.
had so much energy left in him. What a
My
shame.
goodness.
What a
I know.
damn shame.
A big
Yes,
loss.
coronavirus. So cruel.
That's
Mhm.
probably a
Right.
fitting way to end this. We're talking about none other
Yes,
than
sir.
two siblings.
But the Skatalites performed in New York shortly after Reggae Sunsplash. I am wondering if you have any memory of that. I don't think you were with them at that time. It was in
That's what I-
Brooklyn. A young lady.
You're
was-
talking after when they reformed in '83.
Yes.
Okay.
You remember anything about that song? Have you ever heard any discussion about that?
I believe you're referring to the same shows I was referring to at the Village Gate. It wasn't Brooklyn, it was at the Village Gate.
No, man. This one was in Brooklyn, man. I was there. It was a
Oh,
little
really?
small club, as big as your bathroom on Empire Boulevard in
So
Brooklyn.
he's talking early. He's talking '83 after the Sunsplash. So you're talking earlier than, right?
Shortly after Sunsplash.
Okay.
That sounds like it must have just been whoever was already in New York, because Nibbin Brevitt wouldn't be there. It would be Winston Grenin on drums and whatever bass player they got with, because Lester Rowland already lived. Tommy didn't get to USA until 1985.
Mhm. No, we could only stand outside because I think there were like 8 guys playing horns, but
Wow.
the club was very small, so we just hear Skatalites outside. I mean, couldn't even get inside. There were so many people came out. But
There's
it was a
clip.
fundraiser for a Jamaican teenager who was in New York and was sick, and somebody put it together. You know,
I think it was just Roland and Lester. I know that there's some reviews, maybe Brian Keogh, you could ask if he has a copy of,
Yeah.
I think he showed me once some article about a review of a show with Lester and Roland that had been put together that was not well reviewed. And we also didn't get good reviews when we did the Bunny Wailer tour. We performed at Radio City Music Hall because we had lost, I mentioned before that the band had gone to Japan. So when the band went to Japan, or the 3 guys went to Japan, we went from a 10-piece to a 7-piece. And then when we got to Radio City Music Hall, where my knees were literally knocking together because there was no Jackie. This place was 4 stories high.
Sure. Yep.
And I was just like, oh my God. So anyway, we didn't have, we were missing quite a few of the members that had made us sound so huge like we did in LA and stuff. And now we're not sounding so huge. So the review in the Times says that we were underwhelming.
I love that.
Well, you made up for it ever since. So.
Yes. So
Yeah.
New York now became, California now became big band.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, the Cal and still is our main market. That's why, of all the places that we're doing a tour with actual routing, it's coming to see you guys, We got, by the way, if I may plug it tonight.
Yes, please do.
Thursday night, we're in Phoenix at the Musical Instrument Museum. Friday night, we're playing with the Agrolites at the Punk Rock Bowling Festival. And Saturday, we're at Ska Land in Los Angeles, big festival.
Yes.
And Sunday, we're in Santa Cruz at Malwa's Alley. Then Wednesday, we're at Mill Valley at the Sweetwater Music Hall. Thursday, we're in we're in Humboldt, in Arcata, in the Humboldt Brewery. And then Friday night, we're playing with the Bandulus in Eugene. And Saturday, we're playing with the Bandulus in Portland. And Sunday, we're playing with the Skatalites in Seattle.
Why
Nice.
Ska's alive and well, man. Ska is
Yes,
really
yeah.
and truly
What do you
alive
mean?
and well. Alive
Yes,
and well.
yes, yes.
You read
And,
it.
you know, there's
you read
renewed
it on the
interest in
paper.
Ska. There's renewed interest in Ska. You know, several books came out over the
Yeah,
past
yeah,
it's
couple of
been-
months. Yeah,
It's been
man.
a big year. It's been a big
Mark
couple years.
Wasserman's book.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
another guy, Aaron Kuhn.
Aaron Carnes.
Yeah, name them,
yeah.
Eric.
Just
Yeah,
friended him on Facebook.
Yeah. Yes.
I
Yeah,
saw the
wonderful.
book. I didn't see much of it, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
we interviewed both of them on the show too. But
yeah.
I missed that.
yeah, some great conversations.
Yes,
and,
you're not kidding.
and Ken, really appreciate your time. We'll see you at one of the LA shows, obviously. And just thank you for doing what you're doing and for keeping it going. We know it's never easy.
It's
But
mostly my pleasure, but the actual business is really quite the pain in the neck. But
yeah,
Well, you know, Ken, I have to share something with you. Eric didn't know I was going to tell you this, but when the Skatalites came back, I'd say approximately after you came back the second time, Eric said one of the good things that we really and truly have to appreciate is the energy that these new players are playing with. Additionally, they have preserved the integrity of the original. So that cannot be criticized. It must be complimented. My last words.
very good. And actually, to that point, very important.
Yeah.
We would be remiss. The younger, and I say younger, but the current players that we didn't talk about that are on tour. Can you name them?
well, we have Sparrow Thompson on drums. We have Val. Oh no, I'm sorry. Val is not going to be on this tour.
You're kidding. He's sick?
He's having health issues. So we have a guy from Anguilla. They call him Talawa. His name is Philip. Jesus, Philip Jordan, I think. No, I better not quote me on that.
And he knows the
Yeah.
Skatalite songs?
Yes, man. He's he used to play with a very famous drummer from the East Coast that we call Drummy Glenn, who's actually from Trinidad, but he goes way back. He used to play with Val in New York City, and Talawa comes from, I think he's also a Berkeley grad though,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken. He plays with some of the best, and he's very, very good. Nobody's going to be disappointed.
I'm sure.
Nice. Yes, so I guess we just about reach our destination, eh?
Yes.
Yes, man.
Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Oh, and we'll be at Global Ska Festival in Mexico City on November 14th.
Yes, so I'm trying to get to that one. Probably
Also
won't
with the
happen.
Agrolites, and Stranger Cole
I know, man.
will sing some songs with the
Wow.
Ska.
All right.
I know. Yes.
Excellent.
So you're not back in Stranger Cole, you're just playing some songs.
No, I'm not. No, he's playing with both, with a Mexican band backing him. He's gonna sing some songs with us as well.
Nice.
Came up
Wow.
last minute because I told them that Doreen couldn't make it, so he said, "Well, we'll get Stranger to come up."
Yes. Nice. Nice.
Stranger always loves to sing with us, and we very much love him.
Yeah, very
Yes.
nice guy, sir. Very nice
Yes,
guy.
yes.
There's one man I know has no enemies nowhere on planet Earth. Stranger. More
Sure.
like stranger.
Yes.
Well, Ken, really and truly, thank you. Been in
My
conversation
pleasure,
with
man.
Ken Stewart.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the
Yes.
years of support from Los Angeles fans,
Yes.
friends, musicians.
Mhm.
One love.
And
Yes,
many
sir.
more. And many more.
Mhm.
Junior, thank you.
Oh, thank you as well, man. And please follow us on History of LA Ska on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and join our Facebook group. And please follow me on Instagram at Junor Francis. This series is produced by my good friend here, Eric Kohler. This is his brainchild, and also by Rockery Radio. And please follow at Rockery_radio on Instagram for fresh rock, rhythm, soul, and Jamaican music inspired daily playlists. Once again, I want to thank everyone for
Yes. And
listening, for participating, and making this happen.
And real quick, the final word, Ken, the Skatalites on social media, the social media handle.
The Skatalites band, but if you go facebook.com/Skatalites,
Yep.
Instagram.com/Skatalites, Twitter, etc. It's all Skatalites.
Perfect. All right.
Skatalites.com.
And Ken, thank you also for taking a stand against injustice. You're always speaking up on
Yes.
behalf of
Very true, very
the
important.
plight
as well.
of African American and Black people in general. It takes tremendous courage to do that. So I want to
It's
thank
true.
you. I had to mention that.
No, it just comes natural.
Yes. All right.
I've always fought against injustice.
Yes.
That
Just
was
want to
one-
bring that up.
Like the Skatalites only doing 10 shows in 1 year. Couldn't accept that.
Right.
I know. That's true.
All right. Good. Yes.
Many thanks and much love and big respect to you. Thank you, Junior. Thank you, Ken. Give our best to everyone and safe travels out there on the road as well.
All right, you take care. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you.
All right.
Yes,
Take
indeed.
care. Bye-bye.